He went from being Barcelona's most promising talent of the 2019s to not even getting a look on loan. Ansu Fati had the world at his feet, had everything needed to get to the top. And yet somehow his world came crashing down and he lost everything.
Fueron muchos días de agobio, ¿no? Y dolor también, sufrimiento.
Fati's story actually begins with his dad. See, his dad, Bori Fati, used to be a former pro playing for some local teams in Portugal, until he moved to Marinaleda in Spain and decided to settle down there. He eventually settled down in Herrera, and once he figured life was comfortable enough now, he was okay with the rest of his family moving over to come and join him. And what he discovered about a young Ansu left him stunned. Everyone was always telling me Ansu had started playing football when I left. I didn't realize how good he was until they told me he started dribbling everyone by. At the age of 5, the kid was already a natural, and my guess is it runs in the family. Ansu is actually the youngest of 3 kids. His older brother, Brahima, trained at pro level and signed for Sevilla's academy when they arrived in Spain. As soon as he got there, Ansu continued developing his talent. He worked with the local team Herrera, while his brothers trained with Sevilla, and pretty soon it was obvious the kid was destined to become a star. For a kid, he had amazing feet, dribbled past his mates easily, and could score goals. So when the news of the young kid from Herrera started spreading out, he attracted interest from the 2 biggest clubs in the country, Real Madrid and Barcelona. Both teams had heard about a young Ansu, and so they sent scouts over to come and watch him. And they were so amazed at what they saw, they wanted to sign him straight away. Real Madrid put in an offer with his dad first, but the talks fell off. And that was because Barca wanted him so badly that it showed. They came to his house on several occasions to convince him to join the club, set up countless meetings with his dad to talk about the La Masia project and the youngsters that had passed there like Messi and Iniesta. And all of that must have gotten to them because in the end their decision was clear. Ansu had joined Barcelona and got registered in time to join La Masia. At the age of 10, Ansu was one of the most promising talents for his age, and the pride on his dad's face was clear for everyone to see. His future promised a lot. All he had to do was work hard and trust himself and his ability, and the kid put in the hard yards. Ansu continued to impress so much that almost everyone at the club had heard about him. He moved up the ranks quickly and excelled in his game so well that even Messi had already heard about him and come to watch him play in La Masia. And by 2019, Ansu's childhood dreams were about to become a reality. He signed his first professional contract with the club, and days later it got even better by coming on as a late substitute for Carlos Perez in the 5-2 win versus Osasuna. Fati had become the youngest player to play for the club for the first time in 68 years. Whoa! If you thought he was done breaking records, the kid was only just starting. 6 days later, and Fati had everyone talking about him. His goal against Osasuna made him the youngest goal scorer in the history of the club at the time, and the 3rd youngest in La Liga history. In the space of a month, he'd gone from a prospect at Barcelona to getting hugs from Lionel Messi at the Nou Camp. Incredible! Fati's stocks were rising fast, and he was equally showing he could deal with the pressure too. The records kept on tumbling every time he played. In the same September, he became the youngest player to score and assist in the same La Liga game, became the youngest player to feature for Barcelona in the Champions League in the 0-0 draw at Dortmund. And on the 10th of December, he was at it once again.
Fati should do it in the net! Barca have scored a second!
His goal here, the game winner for Barcelona versus Inter Milan at the San Siro, had just made him the youngest goal scorer in Champions League history. He just turned 17 2 months back and was already balling on the biggest stages. By the end of his first professional season, for a 17-year-old, Fati had put in proper numbers. He had 8 goals and 1 assist in 33 matches that season. And it's important to note that the stats didn't do full justice on how well he played. Sometimes he made cameo appearances with very little game time left, but as the season went on, Barca's head coach, Ronaldo Koeman, began to trust him even more, and in turn he was exciting to watch. Away from the stats now, and Fati looked like a proper baller. The answer to the question Barca and their fans had been asking for 2 years even. In 2017, Neymar shocked the world by leaving the club to join PSG, breaking the iconic MSN trio. And ever since, Barca has spent a fortune trying to get the perfect replacement down the left. In the same window, they'd signed Felipe Coutinho and Ousmane Dembele for a combined fee of over $300 million. Neither of them worked. Coutinho preferred to play down the middle, as he was never a winger in the first place. And Dembele was quite frankly always injured. They even got some random transfers like Malcolm and Kevin Prince Boateng, and in the summer of 2019, they got Antoine Griezmann from Atletico Madrid for $130 million. All of these transfers to a large extent at the time failed, but with Fati it was different. It was like watching a younger version of Neymar with potential. Every time he had the ball, the fans knew something was gonna happen. He was very direct too. He wasn't just dribbling or taking on defenders for the fun of it. He was getting in dangerous positions and helping the team advance the ball into the opposition's half too. Ansu finished his first season a La Liga standout. He won the Player of the Month award in September and even made the UEFA La Liga Revelation Team of the Year. He was even tipped to be the top pick for the Golden Boy Award later on. And at the start of the new season, his fine form was rewarded on the international stage. Now Ansu had a choice. Originally, his parents are from Guinea-Bissau, and he had every choice to go play for them since he spent his early years there. But once he made his debut in La Liga, the Spanish Federation came calling. Now these guys were determined to do whatever it took to get Fati to play for them, probably because it reminded them of the Messi situation years back. Messi could have played for Spain if he wanted to, but he chose differently, and now another talent was coming out of La Masia that was showing even better early signs of the stuff Messi did back then. There's no way they were going to slouch on this one, so they put the pressure on the Spanish FA, and on the 20th of September 2019, Fati was granted Spanish citizenship after choosing to let go of his Guinea-Bissau citizenship, meaning he was now a Spanish citizen and was eligible to play for La Roja. Now, all of that paperwork was done. It was simply a question of waiting for that special email to announce his selection to the team, and later on in the month, when it finally happened, he simply couldn't say no. Luis Enrique gave him his first national team call-up in the matches against Germany and Ukraine in the Nations League. And while he had just a handful of minutes against Germany, he hit more game time against Ukraine, and that's when he showed the entire country just how good he could be at this stage. A goal and an assist for the national team at 17 years old. He looked like a kid, but he was already playing like a seasoned pro. Ansu's goal against Ukraine also made him the youngest goal scorer for the Spanish national team at the time, breaking a 95-year-old record in the process. If anyone still doubted him back then, this was the turning point. The kid was all set to be the real deal. Back from international duty now, and Fati kept the good performances coming, and in the Champions League that season he scored in the opening 3 group stage games. Allow me to rephrase that. Barca played Ferencvaros, Dynamo Kyiv, and Juventus, and Fati had 3 goals and 1 assist in the opening 3 games. Amazing! Fati even got the nod to play in his first El Clasico that season, and even though the team lost, he was the shining light in the match. He scored his first El Clasico goal in the 3-1 loss, and his career was fully on the up. Fati's technique combined with his pace and dribbling ability as well as his eye for goals already had the makings of a complete winger. Despite his age, he wasn't scared of any opponent and would willingly take on anyone who tried to stop him. But you see, the game sometimes can be wicked. Fati was all set to become Barca's next star, but I guess fate had other plans for him, because against Real Betis in November, Fati soon experienced the injury that would mark the beginning of the end for him. Due to his excellent form, Fati was in the team as expected, and he was balling out too. On one occasion, he drove the ball into the box, got caught, and won a penalty for his team. But instead of celebrating, Fati stayed down, hurt, because he knew right there that something wasn't right. The thing that snapped, it was his meniscus. Fati had ruptured the meniscus in his left knee, And once the test results came out, the best option the doctors at the club came to was surgery to help him get better. So they sidelined him for a period of 4 months, but in the end it was double that and even more. After surgery, Fati didn't feel better. He continued experiencing a burning sensation in his left knee. So the doctors took him in again, and that's when they realized his meniscus was still inflamed. A big reason for that though was the club doctors themselves. Now, after initially injuring his knee, having surgery and going into rehab, Fati saw a specialist, and the plan was for him to ease his way back to fitness. As a result, Ansu's specialist had recommended a training session at least once per day for Fati. But the club doctors wanted to see one of the key young players in the team back. So once they thought Fati was doing well, they went against the specialist's advice and increased his training sessions to 2 per day. The workload became too much for Fati, and in the end his meniscus gave up, and the surgery earlier on was only the beginning, because he had to go again. Fati had a second surgery in November 2020, then a third in March 2021, and finally he had another one in May 2021. By the time he was back on the pitch, Fati had missed a total of 9 months with injury. And to put this into perspective, that's how long it takes to recover from an ACL. The truth is, once he was back, Fati came scared. He was no longer the exciting player the world had gotten to meet in 2019. It didn't mean he didn't try, but every time he attempted a dribble or tried to change direction and move the opponents like he had in the past, it was at the back of his mind that one sharp twist could send him back to that treatment room, and so he started playing safe. Heck, he'd have even quit if not for Mr. Football, who kept him going in the hospital through the dark days. Fati's return was a positive sign to the Barca fans. They'd clearly missed him, and he couldn't have come back with a bigger bang. Scored on his return to the No Camp. It was like it was written in the stars. Fati was back with the team and determined to fight his way back to getting the position he had lost. His mind was ready and his head was in the game and the competition. But unfortunately, his knee wasn't, because by November 2021, Fati was out again. He'd come on as a 61st minute sub in the game versus Athletic Club, and in the same game he had to get subbed out because he was out injured again. Fati ended the 2021-22 campaign with 10 appearances in La Liga and 15 in all competitions. 6 goals and 1 assist in all competitions. Fati also knew deep down that the injury he sustained was a continuation of something bad, and in 2022-23 it got even worse. Surprisingly, he was fit for large parts of the season. It seemed like that troublesome meniscus injury that had been hindering his game was finally over. But the damage it left on Ansu was fatal. He was no longer his confident, free-flowing self. He was now scared of dribbling and started passing the ball more. In his first season, Ansu Fati was averaging 4.64 take-ons per game. In 2022-23, the figure had dropped to 2.93. With his explosiveness and unpredictability gone, Fati was now a shadow of what used to be. The brave kid from La Masia who could take on fullbacks with fear, or easily beat multiple opponents at the same time, was passing the ball back and trying to play safe. He wasn't as exciting anymore and played with care. He didn't want to get injured again. Nothing was the same anymore for Fati, and the system around him had changed too. For starters, Messi was gone. After leaving at the end of 2021, the following season should have been Fati's chance to step up and help the team with Messi's departure, but the injuries prevented him from doing so. Barca had also changed coaches. It's important to note that Ronald Koeman gave him a run in the team, and I guess Koeman was willing to trust Fati to a large extent. Xavi, not so much. There were other players from La Masia in the pecking order in front of Dembele, and after signing Rafinha from Leeds United, Xavi made it pretty clear Fati was going to have to get used to his new role of becoming a bit part player. The harsh truth, he was no longer the young rising star at the club anymore. Another kid had come in, and this 16-year-old was taking the frame by storm. Lamine Yamal had everyone talking about him, just like they did for Fati when he was younger. It was like watching a fit version of himself play, but this time with a left foot. The order of wingers in the Barca first team was now stacked. Rafinha, Ousmane Dembele, Lamine Yamal, Memphis Depay were still in the team too. And all these guys were to a large extent fitter and more available than Fati was. And it just meant that he was going to get overlooked on almost every occasion. Fati had a personal highlight at the end of 2022 though. He made the Spanish national team squad for the World Cup and even got to play 22 minutes in each of the defeats to Japan and Morocco. And by the end of 2022-23, Fati had fallen even further behind. Come the start of last season, season, a few days before the end of the summer transfer window, Fati had a decision to make. Despite all the injuries he faced early on in his career, it's very easy to forget that he was still only 20 years old at the time, and he still had his career ahead of him if he could get back on track. In the end, Fati opted to make a move he felt would resurrect his career. He wasn't playing as much at Barcelona anymore, and Xavi had started using more and more options, leaving him on the bench. So Fati took the bold step to move abroad and signed on loan for the Seagulls. Honestly, could have seen this from two angles. On one part, this was a struggling kid who'd been through so much and was trying so desperately to revive his career. So when Brighton dropped the proposal to sign him on loan, he jumped at it without thinking twice. And on the other hand, Fati simply wasn't working hard enough, or was maybe too scared of the competition in front of him, or the fact that he had fallen behind, but he wanted to become a guaranteed starter elsewhere. Either way, Fati made the switch to join Brighton, and in his first few weeks in the Premier League, he looked like he was finding his feet again. He'd scored twice in the Premier League against Aston Villa and Manchester City in his opening 5 games, got a goal and an assist against Ajax in the Europa League, and scored against the same opponents home and away actually. But once again, just as it looked like it was going on the up, he picked up this calf injury against Nottingham Forest, and like that, his season was effectively done. Fati's injury made him miss over 3 months worth of action, and by the time he came back, as well as the case at Barca, he'd fallen down the pecking order. And this one hurt even more. See guys, Brighton had taken a big risk to sign Fati, because the manager at the time, Roberto De Zerbi, well believed in Fati's potential, and thought the club would be a great place for him to find his feet again. Fati's wages were close to the 180k mark at Barcelona, and as part of the loan deal, Brighton agreed to pay 80% of it to get him play for them. But the deal didn't work out. After the injury, Fati couldn't get back into the team. I mean, no offense to Brighton, but falling off at Barcelona is one thing. Falling off at Brighton, that's another story. It's the current summer window now, and Fati's future is still in the air. He's got a contract that runs through to 2027, and I'd bet he doesn't want to wait until that long before leaving for free and getting a club. But at the same time, given the way his teams have been playing, getting into that Barcelona team might be harder than it was under Xavi. They've switched coaches to a new man now. Hansi Flick is in charge now, and his style of football demands that high-intensity level with physically fit players, something Fati has struggled with over the years ever since that injury. Who knows, maybe a move away might just be the best solution for everyone involved. Plus, I don't think Fati would be that much of a fan favourite any longer, especially after his dad came out in his defence against the previous administration. As a father, I am angry, yes, like any father, because seeing Ansu play so little makes you a little angry. I tell them that we deserve so much more. Maybe they do, but the situation demands a certain style he can't adapt to. On a personal level, you've got to feel for the guy. 2021 was supposed to be Fati's year. When he first came up, he was on that same level with Vinicius back then. Actually, even better. 2024 now, and while he'll be returning from a failed loan spell at Brighton, Vinicius might just be holding the Ballon d'Or. In the month, Fati turns 22. He went from being the next Messi to not even getting a look in at the team. Safe to say, Fati's career could have been so much more if he'd steered clear of injuries. Just like this next dude, if only he'd managed to work even more. The guy with the most insane first touch in all of football, and yet he failed to conquer the game and ended his career in regret. Hit the next video to find out the striker who failed to run and still managed to outscore everyone.